By the late autumn of 1944, the Pacific War had become a colossal grinding engine of destruction. The American war machine and industrial titan awakened was now on the offensive, island by bloody island, pushing the Empire of Japan back to its very doorstep. The ultimate prize, the strategic linchpin of the entire Pacific, was now within reach: the Philippines. General Douglas MacArthur's promise to return had materialized as the largest invasion fleet ever assembled in the Pacific, a breathtaking armada poised to land at a place called Leyte Gulf. The fate of the war, the future of Asia, and the lives of hundreds of thousands of men hung in the balance. For the Imperial Japanese Navy, once the proud, undisputed masters of the Pacific, this was the final, apocalyptic gamble. Battered by years of attrition, their carrier fleet decimated, their best pilots now ghosts, they gathered the last vestiges of their once mighty surface fleet. They devised a plan of such breathtaking complexity, audacity, and arrogance that it could have only been born from desperation. It was called Shogo I, a decisive battle designed to lure the main American fighting force, Admiral Halsey's powerful Third Fleet, away on a wild goose chase, and then, like wolves descending on a fold, to have their own massive battleships sail in from two directions and annihilate the vulnerable, lightly protected American invasion force. The iron heart of this plan, the mailed fist of the Japanese Empire, was Admiral Takeo Kurita's center force. It was the most powerful surface fleet left on the planet, a phantom force of steel and fire that had slipped through the San Bernardino Strait. It was led by the single most powerful, most terrifying battleship ever built by mankind, the Yamato. The Yamato was not merely a ship, it was a 72,000-ton demigod of naval warfare, a floating fortress armed with 9 colossal 18.1-inch guns, the largest as most powerful naval guns in history. Each one fired an armor-piercing shell the weight of a small car over a distance of 26 miles. Alongside her steamed her sister ship, the Musashi, sunk just days earlier, and other legendary battleships like the Nagato and Kongo, accompanied by a host of heavy cruisers and destroyers. They were the hunters, and they believed the defenseless American landing ships and their precious cargo of men were now helpless, waiting prey. And they were almost right. Protecting the northern flank of the landing beaches, a vast expanse of ocean that was supposed to be safe, was a tiny, almost pathetic collection of American ships designated Task Unit 77.4.3, codenamed Taffy 3. Taffy 3 was not a battle fleet. It was a glorified babysitting service, a collection of the Navy's slowest, weakest, and most expendable ships. It consisted of 6 small, slow, and unarmoured jeep carriers, converted merchant ship hulls with a flight deck slapped on top, and a screening force of just 3 destroyers and 4 even smaller, cheaper destroyer escorts. Their job was to protect the troops on the beach from lone submarines and wandering aircraft, not to fight the world's biggest battleships. The largest guns they possessed were 5 inches, cannons that fired shells which would bounce harmlessly like pebbles off the Yamato's 16-inch thick armour belt. They were, by every conceivable naval calculation, completely and utterly outmatched. They were lambs in a slaughterhouse, and the wolves were closing in. On the morning of October 25th, 1944, as the sun began to rise, the impossible happened. An American pilot on a routine anti-submarine patrol broke radio silence, his voice not just urgent but trembling with a mixture of raw terror and utter disbelief. Enemy surface force of 4 battleships, 8 cruisers and numerous destroyers sighted. I am being fired upon by ships with pagoda masts. On the bridge of the Taffy 3 flagship, the carrier Fanshawe Bay, Rear Admiral Clifton Sprague thought the pilot was either insane or drunk. Halsey's entire Third Fleet was supposed to be guarding this sector. It was impossible. He got on the radio and demanded the pilot verify his report. The reply came back, strained with panic. "The shells are falling around me right now. I can see the pagoda masts. Pagoda masts. The signature, multi-tiered superstructures of the Imperial Japanese Navy's main battle fleet. Kurita's center force. The wolves of the sea had slipped through the net. They were here, and they were just 20 miles away, their bows pointed directly at Taffy 3, closing fast. A wave of cold, professional dread washed over Sprague and his command staff. This was not a battle, it was an execution. Taffy 3 was caught. They were too slow to outrun the Japanese fleet. They were too weak to fight it. Surrender was not an option. By all rights, their war was over. The complete annihilation of Taffy 3 and the subsequent massacre of the defenseless landing ships on the beaches would take less than an hour. It was in this moment of absolute hopeless despair that Admiral Sprague made one of the most audacious, most courageous, and most utterly insane decisions in the history of naval warfare. He looked at his tiny fleet of tin can destroyers and destroyer escorts. He knew what he was asking them to do. He got on the radio and gave a simple order that should have been a death sentence. They would not run. They would not hide. They would turn and they would charge directly into the teeth of the most powerful surface fleet on planet Earth. Among these tin cans was a small brand new Fletcher-class destroyer, the USS Johnston, commanded by a man named Ernest E. Evans. Evans did not even wait for Sprague's order. Seeing the Japanese fleet on the horizon, he turned to his crew and announced, "A large Japanese fleet has been contacted. They are 15 miles away and headed in our direction. They are believed to have 4 battleships, 8 cruisers, and a number of destroyers. This is going to be a fighting ship. I will never retreat from an enemy force." He then ordered his ship to charge alone before anyone else. Following him was a small, even more insignificant Butler-class destroyer escort, the USS Samuel B. Roberts. It was so small and so new, its crew affectionately called it the Sammy B. It had never seen major combat. Its captain, Lieutenant Commander Robert W. Copeland, gathered his crew of mostly reservists over the ship's intercom. His words would become legend, a testament to the quiet, unyielding courage of the American sailor. He did not lie to them. He did not offer false hope. He told them that they were approaching a massive Japanese fleet, and then he said, "This will be a fight against overwhelming odds from which survival cannot be expected. We will do what we can with what we have." The Sammy B, the Johnston, and their fellow destroyers turned and charged into history. It was David versus a dozen Goliaths. It was a cavalry charge with ships. Their only hope, their only prayer, was what could only be described as a crazy reverse strategy. Instead of trying to stay out of range, they would get so close to the giant Japanese battleships and cruisers that the enemy's massive main guns couldn't depress low enough to hit them. It was a plan born of pure suicidal desperation. As they charged through the smoke and chaos, the men of the Samuel B. Roberts did the impossible. They weaved between the apocalyptic splashes of the Yamato's 18.1-inch shells, each one landing with a deafening roar and sending up a column of water hundreds of feet high, drenching the small ship. Then they entered torpedo range. The Sammy B, a ship not even designed for this kind of fleet action, launched its 3 precious torpedoes at the Japanese heavy cruiser Chokai. One of them slammed into the cruiser's side, crippling it and slowing it down. But the Samuel B. Roberts was just getting started. Its torpedoes gone, it now did something that left the veteran Japanese admirals utterly and completely shocked. It engaged the Japanese heavy cruisers in a gunfight. The Sammy B's tiny 5-inch guns, designed for fighting submarines, began to fire with a ferocious, almost insane rapidity. The American gun crews, drenched in sweat and seawater, knew their high-explosive shells couldn't pierce the thick armour of the Japanese cruisers, so they didn't even try. Instead, they peppered the enemy's superstructure, bridges, rangefinders, and gun directors with over 600 shells in a frantic 35-minute barrage. It was like firing ping-pong balls at a tank, but the sheer relentless volume of fire was staggering. They set the bridge of the Chokai on fire. They knocked out its forward gun turrets. They caused chaos, confusion and casualties among the Japanese command staff. The Japanese captains on their massive warships were completely and utterly baffled. What was happening? This couldn't be a tiny, insignificant destroyer escort. No small ship would be this aggressive, this suicidal. The sheer ferocity of the American attack, coming from multiple directions at once, was so unbelievable that Admiral Kurita made the single most fatal miscalculation of the entire war. He became convinced that he was not fighting a small sacrificial escort group, but the main American battle fleet of heavy cruisers and carriers from Halsey's Third Fleet. He believed he had stumbled into a massive, brilliantly laid trap. The crazy strategy was working. The suicidal charge of Taffy 3 had fooled the enemy, but the price was immense. The Japanese fleet, recovering from its initial shock, finally found the range. The tiny Samuel B. Roberts was hit by a salvo of 14-inch shells from the battleship Congo. The ship was torn apart. A massive hole, 40 feet long, was ripped in its side. But even as it was sinking, its men refused to quit. The rear gun crew, their part of the ship engulfed in flames and the deck literally underwater, continued to manually fire their single 5-inch gun at a Japanese cruiser until the very last shell was gone. Captain Copeland, his ship dead in the water and breaking apart, finally gave the order to abandon ship. The courage of the American sailors in that final moment was a testament to their character. The unwounded men refused to go into the life rafts until every single one of their injured comrades had been saved, even as Japanese shells continued to fall around them. The USS Samuel B. Roberts, the destroyer escort that fought like a battleship, finally slipped beneath the waves, but its suicidal, heroic charge, along with the incredible sacrifice of the rest of Taffy 3, had achieved the impossible. The hopelessly confused and shocked Admiral Kurita, convinced he was facing a superior force and fearing a massive air attack that was in reality just a handful of planes from the tiny jeep carriers, did the one thing no one in the world expected. He turned his entire victorious fleet around and retreated. The lambs had just slaughtered the wolves. The men of Taffy 3, the expendables who were never supposed to fight, had saved MacArthur's entire invasion. They had faced down the world's most powerful battleship and won through a combination of sheer, unadulterated courage and a strategy so crazy, so suicidal, that the enemy couldn't comprehend it. It was a victory that defied all logic, a story of how one tiny ship, with a crew that refused to die, could change the course of a war.